Hello, everybody. This is Philip Tyrone with 720 System Strategies. This is our monthly strategy call, and this is for November 2020. Today's call, we have Jake Parent talking about his Irresistible bankruptcy script. Before we get to that, just a couple housekeeping items. Please mute yourself on your side. I'm not going to mute it on my side so we can keep engaged, right, with the questions. The way we're going to structure this call is Jake's going to go through his script. There's 16 bullet points that he goes over. We're going to go through 16 bullet points that Jake's going to go through. We're going to send out all 16 bullet points, so if you miss one, you don't have to worry about it. We're going to send out also the entire script laid out, right? So when we send this out to all of you, you're going to have everything. So don't feel like, oh, I missed something, or did I get this right? You're going to have it all, including the recording like we did last month. When Jake goes through each of the 16 bullet points or 16 parts of the intake, we're going to stop at the end of that so anyone can ask questions that they may have so we can just dig in as much as we can. And that's that. Let me just tell you a little bit about Jake. So Jake is a paralegal. He worked for a volume filer in Phoenix, Arizona. And when he was there, he noticed that, and Jake, dig in at any time if I'm getting this wrong or whatever, but you had attorneys in the office. Some were retaining at 30%, some were retaining at 50%, some were returning at 80%. And it's like, why? And you put your sales cap on, and you came up with this process. And it was just a process that you took over, and then you trained the other guys to do. And after thousands and thousands and thousands of intakes later, this is just second nature to you. Is that fair to say? Is that a good summary on how you came up with this?
It is. And we had attorneys that retain as low as 1 out of 10 clients who would come in and meet with them. And this certainly didn't start off as polished as it is today. It's a constant cycle of improvement. When it first came out of the gate, I would say it was certainly better than what the average attorney was doing, but it wasn't anything close to what it is today.
And when you developed this was pre no money down, right?
Yeah, no money down had not been a factor at the time, and even without zero down, we were retaining at 65% of the clients who came in and would meet with us, and then once we added zero down to it, that went up to 80%.
Yeah, fantastic. And so just for everyone to know, so now Jake and I work together. So when I have an attorney that just doesn't have the staff or doesn't want to build out his practice that way, we built a system where Jake takes the calls, manages the intake, and then we send the client, someone who's interested in filing with this law firm and has actually signed a letter of intent saying, hey, I'm interested, I want to move forward. And so, Jake, let's dig in, okay? So let's just go through this as a role play between me and you, and start off each theme or each bullet point with what's on your paper. Let's go through your typical intake. And by the way, how long does your typical intakes take? Like, we've had this on various strategy calls before. Like, what's your typical intake takes how long?
30 minutes.
30 minutes. Okay. Okay, good.
At 20 minutes, if they're not going to, if all of their debt is unqualified tax debt, if it's felony fines, if it's child support, if their debt is all student loans, at about the 20-minute mark, we're gonna call it, put a lid on it, and let them know the bad news. But generally, if we're going to go through the entire process, it takes 30 minutes.
Perfect. Okay. So just once again, the structure. Announce the bullet point you have on your sheet. Let's go through the script as if I'm a debtor, and then we're going to open up for questions at the end. So I'm going to let you take it from here.
Okay. The first 2 bullet points really don't require anybody else to be in the room. The very first thing is setting your own intentions, what your intentions are when you're meeting with this client. And your intentions are entirely yours. The intention that I usually come from is I am looking for the best outcome for this person's life. They seem to think it's bankruptcy. I don't know whether it is yet or not, and I'll tell them this later, that about 20% of the people I talk to, bankruptcy is not going to be a good solution for them. So when I'm setting that intention of my mind, that I'm here to help that person, I'm here to serve that person, I'm here to help them and give them relief if I can, and if not, to help point them in the right direction of someone that can help them if I'm not going to be the appropriate avenue or the appropriate person. The second thing that we're going to focus on is rapport. And with rapport, there have been hundreds of books and thousands of articles written about rapport and how to build rapport and the tactics of building rapport. But the easiest way to build rapport with someone is to decide why you like them. You don't have to tell them why you like them. You just have to figure out on your own, what is it about this person that I like? What is it about this person that I relate to? What is it about this person that resonates with me? That will transmit to them. I would say that if I meet with 100 people, I'm going to genuinely like 98 to 99 of them. And that one person that just rubs me the wrong way, no matter what I do, we're probably not going to end up doing business together. And there's not much I can do about that because I'm probably not rubbing them the right way either. So it's one, it is a skill to develop that not everybody you meet is going to be somebody that you naturally like, that you naturally gravitate towards. I grew up in Arkansas, and as my dad used to say, not everybody's going to be your fishing buddy. And you don't need them to be your fishing buddy, but you can develop that skill. You can develop that muscle of deciding why you like people or why you have compassion for them and why it is you want to help them. Again, that's not something that you have to verbally say to them. It's just going to be expressed in how you're talking to them and how you're dealing with them and how you come across. So those are the first two things that we deal with that isn't necessarily spoken. In order to develop rapport, you are going to have to talk to them for some amount of time so that you can gather enough information to decide why they're likable or what it is you like about them. But then after that, we're moving on. So once the call begins, and I developed this 100% with in-person appointments, but it works over the phone and in person. So either of those, obviously you're going to say some things differently over the phone than you will in person, but for this, we're on the phone, so I'm just going to act like we're doing a phone consult. Once they answer, I say, hello, I'm Jake. I'm a bankruptcy paralegal. I've been a paralegal since 1995, and I've been involved with bankruptcy since 2009. The reason I'm giving them that information is so that they feel safe, so that they feel secure. That all of these people, it's probably one of the worst days of their life, them having to call you, and we need to keep that in mind, that while to us, it's just a Tuesday, that we've talked to multiple bankrupt people that day, and it is literally just another day in the office for us. For most of the people that we're going to deal with, this is a one-time event. If you do this business long enough, you do get repeat customers as soon as the time limit's up, and it's not as emotionally difficult for them, but it is still an emotionally difficult call. So in that introduction, you're just trying to lay out your bona fides and why they should trust you and why they're in good hands to talk to you about bankruptcy. And you don't need to belabor it. You don't need to beat it to death. Anything that you have to say about yourself that you can cover in about 30 seconds on why you're a great bankruptcy attorney is going to be sufficient. Does anybody have any questions about the first three sections there?
So, Jake, I want to ask you a question. For someone you haven't met yet, how are you telling yourself before you meet them that here's what I like about this guy?
If they've typed anything on the intake, I'll look at that, and it's generally, it's about 3 more points in where I ask them their first question, where they're telling me their story, that I'm trying to find something in that story that I can relate to, that I like, that I'm compassionate about, that I understand, that I can have empathy for that person.
Okay, so you're deciding when you like them during the intake, not prior. Okay, I misunderstood that.
Right. Yeah. Part of our intention setting and part of our mindset that we need to be compassionate for them. And I say that because, having worked with quite a few attorneys in the coaching of them, which also goes back to the mindset that people aren't coming to you with a legal problem. They're coming to you with an emotional problem. And their emotional problem is financial based, and there may be a legal solution, but they're not looking for a legal solution. They have anxiety. They're up in the middle of the night. They're worried about losing their truck. They're worried about losing their house. They're worried about having their bank account garnished, and that, that's an emotional issue that's affecting them, and that a lot of times as legal professionals, we're trying to give them a legal answer, and they're not coming to us looking for a legal answer. They're coming to us looking for an emotional solution to a financial problem they have.
Fantastic. And what would you say to the attorney if that says to you when they hear that, they say, that's too foo-foo. It doesn't really matter. Like setting an intention, thinking about like why I like the person. They either need it or they don't. I mean, come on, Jake. What would you say to that?
The first thing I would say to that is, have you ever walked into a room, seen your spouse sitting in a chair from behind, and immediately known their mood? Can't see their face. You can't see anything else about them. They're just sitting there in a chair, but you already know their mood. You already know their emotional state. That whatever our emotional state is, even if we're just talking to them on the phone, that it's going to come through on that call to that person, and how we show up and how we're trying to help them. If the only thing you care about is, I just want to get off the phone with this person as quickly as possible and have them pay for this bankruptcy, they know. They know. They may not tell you, but they're probably not going to sign up with you. Occasionally they will, but that's when you get retention numbers like 1 out of 10 people that you talk to. No matter how great a legal scholar you claim to be, they don't want to do business with you.
Okay, good deal. Let's move on. Let's move on to bullet point 4 and on. Good deal. Thank you. That's great. Great intro.
Okay. The second thing we do is, we were talking before that this is an emotional issue for them, not a legal issue. It's a legal issue for us. It's an emotional issue for them, that we're going to recognize the state they're in. And I start that by saying, I'd like to thank you for scheduling this call. I realize how difficult this is for you, and that nobody is happy to have to talk about filing bankruptcy. It's always an option of last resort. I appreciate what you're doing and how difficult it can be to take this call. So thank you for being here and having the courage to show up. That gives them the recognition that they're doing something difficult in their lives, and lets them know that you're on the same page with them, that instead of it just being, hey, this is my Tuesday and I'm talking to someone else who's in debt about bankruptcy, that you realize as an individual this is a big deal to them. Any questions about that? Great. Moving on. Next thing I do is set the agenda. Setting the agenda, again, gives them a framework for what's going to happen so that they feel comfortable that we're not just winging it, that there's a process that we're going through, and that this process is going to be there to help them. So I'm going to walk you through what's going to happen during our call. I'm going to ask you what your situation is, how you're dealing with your debts. I'm going to explain the different types of bankruptcies to you. We're going to find out a little bit more about your financial situation in detail, and then I'm going to explain how we can help. And then I'll explain to you, we'll know by that point whether bankruptcy is a good solution for you or not. 20% of the people that I meet with, bankruptcy won't help them. If that's you, I'll let you know, and we'll try and find out if there are any other solutions available to you. And then finally, if bankruptcy is a good solution for you, I'll go through the services that we offer, how much those cost, and what it will cost you. And just not to keep you in suspense, we do have zero-down offers so that you don't have to worry about how much you have to pay today. Okay? And that's the end of the agenda. Any questions on why we set the agenda?
Well, yeah. My name is Leonard Boyer.
Hey, Leonard.
From New Jersey. And zero down is specifically unethical in New Jersey because it makes attorneys are, at a Chapter 13 only, an attorney can accept the payment through the plan. In a Chapter 7, it's unethical because it's making the attorney would be considered a creditor. So it may be legal in other states, but not in New Jersey or New York.
Anything I say here is not state specific, and like when it comes to the agenda, there may be things in your state that you have to cover on the agenda.
Right.
And in the calls that I'm taking, the states that I can talk to, we do offer zero down, and so you would just take that portion out of it, adapt it to what's going to work best for you and your office.
So you have a PDF script that you can email us?
Yeah, we're going to do that, Leonard. Leonard, we're going to give you the bullet points and the actual script. So all that, just for those who just joined us, we're going to give the bullet points. He's going through the bullet points right now, but all the bullet points and the full script will be emailed out with the video link of this or the audio link of this. So,
okay.
Yeah.
And when I sat down in clients in person, let me see how long the script is. The script is 7 pages long. I didn't have a 7-page script on the conference table when I was talking to them. I had 2 pieces of paper. On one piece of paper were the 16 words that cued me to where we were in the process. So it's like agenda. Okay, I know what to say about the agenda. I know what to say there. Next comes what happened. And on the other page, I had a list of all my exemptions. So when I was talking to people, I didn't have to remember anything off the top of my head. Obviously, some of them are easy to remember. Other exemptions don't come up as often. So I would have 2 pieces of paper on the table with me. One was literally it was 16 words on it in large font so that I could look down and see it without squinting. And then the other one was the list of exemptions that we were talking. I didn't have a 7-page sales script on the conference room table.
Perfect.
Cool.
That's great, Jay. Thank you. And just for those that just joined us after my intro, this script was developed and was perfected before the bifurcation of no money down. So the roots of this are in the pay in full intake or the prepay intake. Okay.
I did this intake for 3 years before zero down was available.
Perfect. Okay.
So I did, and I was doing anywhere from 8 to 12 intakes a day.
Great.
They said we did volume.
Great. Okay, Jake, let's move on.
So the next thing, this is me now turning the microphone over to the client and letting them tell me what happened. This is key. This is critical. In the attorneys that were in our office, they almost never, ever asked this question, which was just completely bewildering to me. But this is the crux of everything good that can happen is going to happen from this. So I say, okay, Bob, nobody schedules an appointment with the bankruptcy law firm because you missed one credit card payment or you're feeling a little financially shaky. Usually something happened 6 months ago, a year ago, 18 months ago, and it snowballed out of control and brought you here to me today. What happened? And then I'm silent. I listen. Sometimes I take notes. Occasionally I have to stop a client because they're oversharing or they've gone too long. But most of the time they talk anywhere from usually 4 to 5 minutes. They tell their story of job loss or medical problem or, financial situation that changed, divorce, whatever it is that happened. They walk you through that sequence of events in their life and how that's impacted them. A lot of times when they're telling you that, they're also going to be, even though you haven't asked about the specific financial numbers yet, they're going to start telling you about different debts that they're behind on and what those are adding up, and then you start to get a good idea of whether you're going to be able to help them in the long run or not.
How long will you let someone go before they go too long? We've had this conversation on multiple strategy calls.
I let a woman go for 20 minutes one time just because I wanted to see how long she would go and her story had more red herrings and dead ends than anybody I've ever talked to. So that one was 20 minutes, but usually around the 7-minute mark, they've said everything useful that they can say. And if they're starting to go off on tangents and dead ends, usually around the 7-minute mark, I'm gonna jump in and redirect them.
And how will you cut them off? Like let's just hey, my father did this to me, and then my husband did this to me, and then the divorce happened, and then this happened.
I think I have a pretty good handle on how you got here today, and everything that brought you up to this, and and why it is you're considering bankruptcy, and that's a tough road. That's a tough road you've been down. I can see why you'd be considering bankruptcy because of that. And then I would just flow right into the next thing, which is, given all that situation in your life, how are you dealing with your debt currently? That's
the next bullet point.
Correct.
Okay.
So I'm gonna give the person recognition that their situation's not good, that I understand their situation. Implicitly, I'm saying I've heard enough about the situation to understand it, and then I'm going to lead that into the next point, which is how are you dealing with your debt currently? What have you done? Have you dipped into your 401k? Are you selling stuff? All the things that people do to try to avoid bankruptcy that we know they shouldn't do, but they're trying to avoid the shame and the social stigma of having filed bankruptcy, which after they've filed it, they find out isn't that bad. So what this question really says, one, it helps us identify what they've done or maybe what they have that we can help them save. But the other thing that it helps us do is identify how desperate they are. That if they have moved heaven and earth not to file bankruptcy and they're finally on the phone with you, they're going to file bankruptcy. They're out of options. And the other thing is, if they've done absolutely nothing, like, hey, what have you done about all these debts? Nothing. All right, well, they may be less likely to file because they really haven't felt any pain yet. It really hasn't caused any discomfort in their lives. They may just be, hey, I'm considering it. I don't know that it's a good option, and it may not be a good option. So this kind of starts to give us a picture of how motivated they are to get that relief in their life.
Very good. Love that question. What have you done to manage your debt? Well, any questions? Okay.
The next thing is, I'm breaking these out as specific questions. During that first question, they may answer all three of these, and you may not have to go back and cover that ground again. But the last question I'm going to ask is, how is that affecting you? You told me your story. You're telling me how you're dealing with it, but how is it affecting you? Is it affecting your marriage? Are you losing your sleep? Are you stressed out at work? Are you not able to concentrate? Are you living with your in-laws because you don't have any money to be anywhere else? Like, how is this impacting your life? And then I'll let them talk to you.
You're identifying all these pain points, right? Yeah.
Correct.
That they're struggling with in real time. Okay, great.
Yeah. The other thing that we're doing is, a lot of times they may be struggling with these things. How many times do we struggle with things in our lives that we don't even realize what the struggle is? That it isn't until we talk to somebody else who is compassionate, who is open. One of the greatest things about them talking to us is that we're not a personal close friend of theirs. We're not in their social circle, and that we're non-judgmental, that we're accepting of that, so they can talk about all these things that they can't talk about to anybody else in their life, or may not be able to talk about anybody else in their life because of the shame that goes along with that. So this may be the first time that they have a clear picture and a clear emotional understanding of what it is they've been dealing with and how much of a heavy load they've been carrying.
Fantastic. I love it. Any questions on that? Okay. Let's do it, Mike.
Okay. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to explain the two different types of bankruptcy to them as personal filers. There's two kinds of bankruptcy, Chapter 7, Chapter 13. I usually explain Chapter 13 first because they're not going to file Chapter 13. So I go through Chapter 13 bankruptcy, explain that briefly. Then I go through Chapter 7 bankruptcy. I go through that in a little bit more detail because that's the type of bankruptcy that they're going to be filing. And I'm assuming that because you're all attorneys, that you know the difference between Chapter 7 and Chapter 13, and that I don't have to go into that in detail.
I think that's a fair assumption. Yeah.
Yeah, sir.
Hey, this is Derek from Iowa. I have a question. Why do you waste your time talking about Chapter 13 if you know they're not going to file that?
I haven't actually looked this up, but I was told by one of the bankruptcy attorneys that I work with that here in Arizona that you have to explain the different types of bankruptcy to them. So I've just generally made it a standard practice. Plus, people ask questions about it. So rather than having them ask a question, it's better if you preempt that and just get it in there first.
Well, one other thing that comes to mind for me, anytime you're marketing anything, you want to frame the conversation, right? And so we've talked about it, 720, you don't bring up the credit scoring program based on improving their credit score. You tie it to their car payment. You plan on buying a car in the next 5 years. Yes, I do. Okay, if you don't rebuild your credit score, you're going to overpay $250 a month. That's $3,000 a year for as long as you own that car. And you're framing and you're anchoring that $3,000 price point in their mind. And then when you bring up that your bankruptcies are $2,000 one time, it's like, okay, do I want to overpay $3,000 a year for multiple years or pay this attorney $500 extra compared to the competitor, right? So for what in my mind, where I thought you were going with this is clearly we've heard this from our clients. Would they sooner have a 7 or a 13, all things being equal? 7, because I don't have to pay them back, right? So you're framing the conversation of, hey, if you qualify, seems like you may, normally a 13, you'd have to pay everything back. But in your case, you may qualify for this. You're framing it, building that contrast. Mm-hmm. I don't know. That's where my mind goes.
That's true. I also forgot one point. This is one of 2 points where I'm actually going to do a full-blown benefit statement, sales statement for the attorney, for the firm. So one of the things that I cover in Chapter 7 is that you're going to be facing a bankruptcy trustee. The bankruptcy trustee, their goal is to seize as many of your assets as they can because they get to keep a portion of that. Our job as your attorney is to make sure that the process goes smoothly and that you don't lose any of your assets, that all of your assets that you have are protected, and that your bankruptcy doesn't get rejected, and that you're going to keep everything that is rightfully yours rather than anybody else facing that. So that is part of the benefit statement that I go through while we're talking about the different types of bankruptcy. So
great.
Thanks for asking that question.
Derek, great question. Any other questions on this? Okay, let's move on.
Okay. The next part is entirely up to you and your bankruptcy practice. This is where we go through our intake form with them, where we cover their income, their assets, and their debts. So whatever you're going to go through, that how much do you make? How often do you get paid? Do you own a car? Leasing a car? Do you own a home? Do you rent a home? How much debt do you have? Who do you owe it to? So that's where we go through all these questions, where we get an in-depth financial picture of what we're dealing with. This is where we're doing the real diagnosis. At that point, if all of their debt is student loan debt and child support debt, once that's over, that's kind of where I'm going to pay bad news. Chapter 7 bankruptcy is not going to be a good fit for you. It's not going to give you the relief you're looking for, and try and point them in a couple different directions so that they can get relief, different resources that are available. But then if that's it, if bankruptcy isn't a good solution, this is where I let them know. If Chapter 7 or Chapter 13 is going to be a good solution, we continue on. Full disclosure, I don't do Chapter 13 at all. During that diagnosis, if I figure out that this is going to be a Chapter 13 bankruptcy, at that point I basically say, hold on, let me get the attorney. He's going to need to help you from here on out. I'm just paralegal. I can talk to you about Chapter 7, can't talk to you about Chapter 13s. But if it's Chapter 7 and we go forward, after I get done asking them all of the financial questions, which makes their 95% of the time makes their situation even more bleak and more clear than we had made it before. After I'm done asking all my financial questions, I ask, what happens if you don't change this? What happens if this doesn't change? And that has them future projecting into the future and lets them know what their life is going to be if they don't change that. After they've answered that question, I ask, why now? Why is today the day that you finally decided to do something about this?
So let's review those two questions again, because that's pretty like the culmination of all this. They're putting in their own words why this is it. So let's review those two questions.
What happens if this doesn't change for you? Mm-hmm. Or what happens if you don't make a change?
And how long is that answer typically? A couple minutes, one sentence? What is that?
It can go anywhere from like a couple of mumbled words to they go in detail for maybe a minute and a half, 2 minutes. Most people don't go much longer than that when they're talking about that. You can see the internal wheels spinning more than they are talking. That it's not so much they're talking as the internal dialogue that they're going through.
I would imagine this is one point that you want to shut up, as the great sales trainers used to say, right? Like, you don't talk during this time. You just let them talk.
Right. As my dad also used to say growing up, never miss a good opportunity to shut up.
Okay. And the second question following up with that is,
why is today the day that you finally had enough and decided to do something about this?
Once again, follow your dad's advice.
I just sit there and listen. If we're talking for 30 minutes, I'm probably only doing about 10 minutes of actual talking. Most of the time I'm sitting there listening. I think it takes me about 5 minutes to get through everything I have to say at the beginning of the call, and then it takes about another 5 minutes for me to get through everything at the end of the call. Most of the time I'm asking short questions and they're giving long answers. A buddy of mine was at my office one day while we were working, and he was greatly tickled because he saw me do this several times where I'd say, "So how much credit card debt do you have?" And then I'd be silent for 5 minutes, and at the end of the 5 minutes go, "Okay, so how much credit card debt is that?" Because they had told me a long rambling story about why they had credit card debt but never actually gave me a figure. I'm sure that's never happened to anybody else on this call.
Any questions on those two questions? Okay.
Hey, Phil.
Excellent.
Yeah, please.
Phil, this is Stuart from Skokie.
Stuart.
I was curious, and maybe we'll get to it, but have you ever, and maybe you've tried this and it doesn't work, but one of the things that we try to do in that initial part of the call is we ask them maybe to state 3 or 4 goals of what the purpose of being there are today, or meeting with us today, and then try to curtail that information gathering and leading them to the point, of hopefully answering those 3 or 4 goals. And then obviously at the end of the presentation, you're asking for the order, which I think is probably a biggest issue that I think most attorneys have, are just simply asking for that order. But what do you think about something along those lines?
Kind of, that's a great suggestion, and I've probably never asked it specifically because it just comes out when I'm asking them, like, how they're dealing with their debts and what the impact of it is, of how it's affecting them. Probably after the impact, that would probably be a great place to insert that on, like, hey, now that you know how this is affecting you, what would you like the outcome to be? I never actually haven't expressly asked that, probably because they volunteer it throughout the process that we take them through. That they tell me they want to, I want to buy a new house in a year and a half, and I can't right now with this financial situation, or whatever it is they're looking for long term. I'd say 80% of the people volunteer it, but making it explicit the process would be a good step. I'll probably be adding that and testing it.
Well, I think the purpose of it is, first, what you've done here is outstanding. I mean, this is really, the methodology is great. I just didn't know if you've ever tried to get them to state in their own words what goals they're trying to accomplish. And then, especially since we're doing a lot of stuff over the phone, my retention rates have fallen off because I'm more comfortable in person. So I'm trying to figure out a way to get them to buy, and I started doing, inserting those goals in there, and I just trying to figure out when the best time for that to be. Because if you can get to the end of the call and say, hey, listen, you told me you wanted to buy a house, get a car and do whatever. Well, do you think what we've talked about here today addresses all those goals? And then that's where you can hit them with that, hey, since we've addressed all these, are you ready to proceed? Or, you know what I'm saying? I can't get any traction talking to people over the phone in a video. and I really like what you're doing here. So I'm just trying to see what you think about that. I'm gonna mute now. Thank you for your time.
I think that's a great idea, and I would probably put it, at the beginning we do what happened, how are you dealing with it, how is this affecting you? And after they've answered those 3 questions, that's probably where I would like, hey, now that we have a clear picture of what you're doing to deal with it and how it's affecting you, what would you like the outcome to be? If we were going to wave a magic wand and everything was better, what kind of outcome would you have when we got off this call?
And Jake, one other sort of wordsmithing it a little bit is when you ask the client, and Stuart, this is a fantastic question because it's giving us all things to think about. How is this affecting you? They're like, well, I can't do this, I can't do this, I'm stressed out, and I'm up at night, right? Maybe the follow-up question could be well, imagine all that being managed. You weren't, and you reiterate it, right? You reiterate what they said. You wouldn't have to be stressed out during the day at work. It wouldn't be affecting your work hours. You could get a good night's sleep. Imagine all those problems being gone. What opportunities or what would be possible for you in terms of financial goals that you would like, or something to that effect, where we segment and we say, hey, look, all this negativity, the stuff that's sucking your energy is going to be gone. What's possible? And then go to the point, and we talked about this actually on last strategy call last month, like that one guy that went into Stephen, I think it was Stephen who brought this up and said he wanted to buy a home. And then you can tie back and anchor back to the home constantly. Jake, what are your thoughts on that?
I love all of that. I generally don't do too many tiebacks myself. I think they're a little pandering that 1 or 2 tiebacks are enough. But once you know the tieback, it becomes mission critical when you get to the point of the decision making. When that balance is going to shift, that's usually the only time I bring it up. But everything you said there on the wordsmithing is spot on. Any
other questions, Stuart? Any other thoughts from you?
No, I just was throwing it out there. I appreciate the feedback.
That's awesome. It's a really good thought.
We're better together. Yeah. Someone has a question.
Better. Almost embarrassed I haven't included it.
Hey, Phil.
Yeah.
This is Eric Klein.
Hey, Eric. How you doing?
All right. So somebody asked about why you have to explain the different chapters of the code to the people, the candidates, because it was part of BAPTA in 2005. Attorneys are required to explain the different chapters of the code, even chapters 11 and 12. And what I do, what I've done is
question. I think we take care of that by giving the disclosure from the clerk. So I don't talk about it. I give them the disclosure at signing.
Yeah, that's fine. Here's just a thought. Many years ago, in 2006, I attended a NACA convention, and you know how they have those, where all the swag is and they sell you products. One company was selling a 15-minute video of what you're required to tell the clients, and then also the process and procedure. And I purchased this video, and I require the people, before I meet with them, to watch this video. Whether they do it from home, I have a link, they can catch it on YouTube, or they can come in and watch it here before I meet with them. And that 15-minute video saves me 30 minutes of time meeting with people, explaining to them the whole bankruptcy process and procedure, and they also satisfy my obligation under 2005 BAPCA.
Great, Eric. Great feedback. Any other questions on this before we move on?
The next thing I do is I start going over what it is we provide, and this is usually where I give them, bad news, good news, best. Bad news is you've got tax debt, criminal fines, back child support, student loans. I understand tax debt in certain very narrow, specific situations can be discharged in bankruptcy. We may have discussed that, but usually I say, hey, some debts won't be able to be discharged through bankruptcy. Some of your debts are those debts. And then I go through those as line items, like, hey, you've got $20,000 in student loans. After this bankruptcy, you're going to have $20,000 in student loans. You've got $15,000 in back child support. After this bankruptcy, you're still going to have that $15,000 in back child support. I'm sorry, there's nothing that we can do about that with bankruptcy. Good news is we can get rid of all your other debts. You've got $30,000 in credit card debt. You got $100,000 in health care debts. That I go through those numbers that they've given me and say these are the debts that we're going to be discharging for you. And then best news is, I go through their assets and what they're going to be able to keep. Hey, you told me that you own this car, you get to keep it. You told me you own this, you get to keep it. If there are going to be assets that are going to be an issue during the bankruptcy, I generally don't wait until this part of the call to discuss that. If someone tells me they've got a $20,000 1967 Dodge Dart and they're not going to part with it for love nor money, we've got a problem here. We should, and I discuss it right then. If there's a problem with assets, usually I discuss it while we're going through the exemptions and that sort of information. But if we don't have anything like that, I wait until this part of the call and say, hey, everything you own that you've told me about, you get to keep. And then ask them how big a difference it'll be in their life once we wipe all these debts out.
So, Jake, do you actually say the bad news, the good news, the best news? Like, do you use those words?
Not always. This is a call flow, not a call script. I don't have it like, hey, we've got, depending on how they talk, I may match that, I may not. It might be like, hey, this is going to be a difficult situation we're dealing with here. Like, your child support, it's still going to be there when we're done with this process. And then I'm also asking them, like, once we do that, hey, you've got $20,000 in student loans you can't discharge. You got $60,000 in repossessed vehicles, credit card debt, and payday loans that you can discharge. Do you think that's still worth it to you?
Mm-hmm.
Because to me, if I was looking at that situation, it's like, well, it's definitely still worth it. But there are people out there I've spoken to who it's like 60-20, and they're like, no, it's not worth it. And I'm like, okay, well, you know your situation better than I do, and I bid them a good day and say if they change their mind to give me a call back.
Okay, any questions on what we provide? Okay.
I have a sales and marketing background, and to me, this is a sales process, not necessarily a legal process. I understand from your point of view this is a legal issue, but for me, it's we're doing intake for clients. It's just an enrollment issue at that point. At no point am I hanging on to the bumper or trying to make sure that they know that they have to file bankruptcy. That if they don't know that they need to file bankruptcy, if they aren't feeling the pain and the discomfort for that, I'm not talking anybody into a bankruptcy that doesn't need it or doesn't want it. That it has to be the best solution for them, and they have to realize it's the best solution for them, not me trying to convince them or persuade them or pry them into it, that it's 100% their call. It always cracks me up that I have people that go, well, this attorney said he'd do it for $1,200. And I was like, all right, well, he probably didn't mention the court fees, probably didn't mention due diligence fees, probably didn't mention these other things. But if you're more comfortable doing business with him, then you can go ahead and do business with him at that rate. And I'd say about 90% of the time they go, nah, I'll do it with you. I was just going to see if you drop your price. And it's like, no, not. That's nice hustle.
What, okay, perfect. And then how do you wrap it up? Do you
okay.
Yeah.
We're almost there. So next thing I do, because we're on 720 credit call, the attorneys that we deal with, we do offer the 720 credit education improvement program. I walk them through all of that. If you've ever been through Phillips training, hey, the difference between a 3% car loan and a 25% car loan, it's $200 a month. We tie that back to it. We've helped 70,000 people rebuild their lives after bankruptcy, foreclosure, or financial disaster. We give it to you for free. No other bankruptcy attorney is going to do this for you. We consider it the first step of getting your life back to normal, and that bankruptcy isn't going to permanently set you back financially. After that, I go. Does anybody have any questions about that?
I think we've hammered that home probably a few times, yeah.
Next, what I do is I go through the line item of services of what we're doing for them as part of the bankruptcy. This may seem, it may seem like a no-brainer to you guys and gals because you're attorneys, but the client doesn't know what's involved. So when I go through the line item of services, I'm saying, hey, we gather all your documents. We put your documents in the order that the U.S. bankruptcy trustee wants to see those documents in. We collate all the paperwork. We take care of your filing fee with the court. We're there with you when we meet with the U.S. bankruptcy trustee for your 341 meeting, that we're doing all the forms and paperwork for you, and we help you with the class before filing. There's another class that you're going to take after filing. that everything that you provide as a service, you're going to list that out in detail. And most of the attorneys that I've worked with personally don't want to do this because they say everybody else does the exact same thing that I'm doing, and that may be true, but the client doesn't know that. And if you're the first person to tell them that you do offer those things, even though it's the exact same things that everybody else is offering, it makes them think or makes them feel that you're offering something special or something more valuable than anybody else has told them. And the thing that you're offering them that's more valuable is that you've taken the time to educate them on what the process is and what's included. Any questions about that?
So these line items of service are like what documents you need, credit counseling, all that stuff, right?
I'm literally talking about what it takes we're going to put together a ream of documents in the order that the U.S. bankruptcy trustee wants to see it in, and that we're going to organize your documents in the order that they want to see it in, that it's literally the paperwork that you do to file a bankruptcy.
Okay, great.
After that, I say it looks like a Chapter 7 bankruptcy is going to be the best solution for you. If they have a family, for you and your family. If they say yes, great. If you wanted to pay in full for a bankruptcy, it would be $2,125, plus there's a $335 filing fee. I'm going to imagine that if you had $2,500, that you wouldn't be talking to me today. You'd be out making moves with your money. Am I right? And before I say that line, they've usually told me what their financial situation is and how much money it is they have in the bank. By and large, the number in their credit, in their checking account is negative. Every once in a while, somebody has some money, but it's rare. If I know they have $2,500, I'll say, great. We have an option that you can pay for the bankruptcy in full. This is how much it is. Then I go into, we have another option, which is zero down. Looks like you'd be most interested in zero down. It would be a payment of, and I'm just going to use nice round numbers here, $50 for 1 year. That total price is this. The additional price of zero down, there is an additional price to zero down. It's not financing. It's not interest. We do have to do extra paperwork when we file a zero down bankruptcy. The difference in the price pays for those additional hours that we spend filing paperwork for the zero down. Would you be interested in doing that?
That's how you tie it up. You tie it up asking for the in with that. Obviously, this would be nuanced depending on the district. In Leonard's case, he would be doing either a paid in full or a payment plan being paid to him in advance. There's some jurisdictions require no money down, or if you can offer no money down 13, that would work. But this can be nuanced per the attorney.
Right. Yeah. Before we had zero down, we required a $100 down payment to get started. After that, we had all kinds of payments. Like we had payments that were as low as $25 a week, but we needed $100 down, or you could give us whatever it was at the time. I believe it was $1,800. Would you like to do $1,800, or would you like to make the $100 down payment? We can get started today. Which do you prefer?
Yeah. When you get the payment plans, obviously tie it to their pay date. You just want to tie it to their pay date and automate everything as much as possible. Automate. Right. Fantastic, Jake. This is great. Any questions overall for Jake?
Jake, this is Derek from Iowa again. So I want to, when it gets down near the end, I know you talked about, you go over all the benefits of what you do, what we'll do for them. But I guess I wasn't really that clear about how you go over their responsibilities. Like, you talk about, okay, we're going to need your pay stubs, we're going to need your tax returns, and go through all the paperwork that they're going to do. Right.
Generally, we cover all that as soon as they sign the paperwork. I do the in-person presentation of the pricing. I have that on a piece of paper. So it's a full-blown, the paper's split in half. On one side is the full price. On the other side is whatever their weekly, biweekly, monthly payment will be. And when I slide that across the table to talk to them about the price, if they pick the paper up, it's a done deal. If they don't pick the paper up, they're not going to retain. How that ends up going. On that piece of paper, there's also, I need them to circle which payment plan they're going to do. I need them to sign it. And then at the bottom, write in their own words why they need a zero down bankruptcy if they can do zero down. If we're doing this over the phone, I text message them a link, and that link takes them to an online page that has that same information there. It has their name, address, it has their name, phone number, email, and then has the different payment options. And then, again, a space where they can type why it is they need a zero-down bankruptcy. And then after they have signed that, or after they have committed that they would like to file bankruptcy, then we go over all the paperwork that we're going to need. I tell them that they're going to have to watch an online video and answer 4 or 5 questions. I do that instead of calling it a pre-credit counseling class, because I deal in a lot of very rural markets where some people, they get pretty freaked out when you tell them they're going to take an online class. Even if you're like, hey, this is a really simple class, just call it into class, gives them a lot of anxiety and freaks them out. I don't personally understand that, but I've seen it too many times to not want to have a solution for that. And at that point, we go through all the documentation that we're going to need for them. When I'm on the phone with them, I go through the documents and say, you're not going to have to remember this because I'm going to send you an email that has on it. So we're going to go through it to see how readily available all of this is for you. Do you have your driver's license? Do you have your recent pay stubs? Do you have any notice of collections? Do you have your creditor bills? Do you have 2 years of tax returns, 6 months of bank statements? That I'm going through those to figure out how readily available they have that, how easy it's going to be for them to gather, and then also let them know that I'm going to send all of this to them in an email that they'll be able to go through and put check marks next to gather up all that paperwork. And then I walk them through the rest of the bankruptcy process. Hey, we gather up the paperwork. We file your case. Once we filed your case, 30 days later, there's a 341 meeting. And then, 2 to 3 months after that, your discharge is final.
Derek, do you have any other questions on that? Does that answer your question?
Not on that.
Okay. Do you have another question on something else?
Yeah. So my other question just deals with business model. Jake, I think most of the people on the call, we do our own initial consultations, and then at some point hand it over to a paralegal to do the work. You're doing it. You're like starting right off with the initial consultation. What role does the attorney play in the typical business model you work with?
They do it both ways. I have some attorneys handle the cases themselves, and others are handing it over to a paralegal to gather the documents. Some attorneys have support staff that follow up with the clients and gather up all the documentation. Other clients use an online portal to gather documents, and then some are true solo practitioners that once I hand the client off to them, they follow up with them on the documents, and then literally do everything from that point forward, that they're mostly interested in being attorneys and not in talking to clients.
Well, so let me piggyback on that. Derek, we've learned on this over the years. It works well when, there's certain attorneys that just, I don't want to do this, I don't want to do this, I don't want to do this. Like, I don't want to, it's hard, anyway, my point is when the attorney is engaged, right, and when Jake gets a letter of intent signed saying, yes, I want to file bankruptcy with this law firm and pay this much amount, and they sign that, you need the engaged attorney. So it's like, okay, great, game on. That's a hot lead, really a hot lead. Call them, help, engage with them, collect the paperwork, do whatever it takes. When you outsource it to software, when you outsource it to all these different, someone else to do it, no one cares about it like the person that's spending the advertising dollars. I mean, let's just face it, right? It's just our staff, our paralegals, whatever, they're not going to be vested the same way. So anyways, when you agree, Jake, we've learned that together.
I would agree. I would also say that even if all you do is give the client an initial call to say, hey, how you doing? Welcome to the firm. We can't wait to take care of you. And then there's a paralegal who gathers the documents from them going forward. I would highly recommend that. I've got a friend in a fairly large personal injury firm here in Phoenix, and he's on the commercials. He doesn't spend much time actually talking to the clients when they come in. But on every appointment, he does manage to pop his head into the room for like 30 seconds to a minute just so that they can see the guy's face who's on the commercial. Like, hey, guys, how you here? We're happy you're here. Thank you for picking us. Does his little spiel and then moves on and turns it back over to the intake specialist.
Well, if anyone has questions regarding that, reply to an email, call me. we can jump on a conference call, or I can explain, or Jake can explain. We're here for you on that. Any other questions regarding this script? I know that our typical strategy calls are typically like 30 minutes. This has been 70. Any other questions you have regarding Jake's script and how we unpacked this? Okay, Jake, I have a question. What percentage of the time are your intakes over 30 minutes?
Maybe 5%.
Okay, that's great.
Like it's with
all this client talking, I mean, I was anticipating a lot more than 5%. That's fantastic.
Usually the only time it goes over that is if either A, I find them entertaining, or B, they do have a really complicated situation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's about it. I don't find that many people personally entertaining, so.
Well, good deal. Well, Jake, thank you for taking the time. This is so valuable. As I said, we are going to be sending out this as a video link, audio link that you can stream, but we're also going to have the script. We're also going to have the 16 bullet points you can unpack. If you want to talk about what Jake does all day long, right? And the beauty about it, instead of him going into the office like he was for years, he's doing on the phone with us for 720 clients. Just reach out to me, and then we can talk about what that looks like. And Jake, thanks for sharing your genius. This is fantastic, and it's great to hear from what was created over thousands and thousands of times.
Thanks for inviting me, Phil. I really appreciate it, man.
Okay, guys. Absolutely. Thank you, everybody. Talk to you soon.